July 31st, I officially signed an agreement with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, otherwise known as the UNODC, to launch the Advanced SXM Rehabilitation Program at the Point Blanche Prison. This is a 4-year program and is for a total cost or an initial investment of 3.8 million euros, and it officially began on August 1st. It will bring long overdue structure, support, and opportunity into our prison system, not only for the inmates, but also for our prison staff. For too long, rehabilitation and professional development has been treated as something we wait to implement until infrastructure is ready. We're choosing a different approach this time. We're beginning now, investing in people, strengthening the ministry from within, and putting the right systems in place before we move into any new facility. Through this program, rehabilitation efforts will extend beyond inmates. While inmates will receive access to education, vocational training, mental health care, and structured reintegration opportunities, a significant focus will be placed on the people that hold our systems together every day. This is our prison staff, of course. Correctional officers will benefit from specialized training and professional development aimed at strengthening daily operations, boosting morale, improving long-term retention. Institutional policies and procedures will also be standardized and closely monitored to ensure a safer, more consistent, and more professional environment across the board. At the same time, we're preparing for the future. As we invest in our current personnel, we're also beginning the process of recruiting and building additional staff capacity. This dual approach ensures that we're not only improving the present, but also actively preparing for the operational demands of the new facility. Multiple efforts are taking place at once, leveling up our staff, enhancing rehabilitation services, and expanding our workforce, because the success of our efforts requires both vision and readiness. This is not a standalone effort. Before signing this agreement, I convened a strategic meeting with local partners and representatives from an Aruba-based organization called Turco Está Posible. Everything is possible in English. They operate using EU-funded rehabilitation programs that they successfully deploy within the prison in Aruba. These initiatives use various tools for inmates' rehabilitation and reintegration at no additional cost for the government. They have been proven effective in Aruba, and with the help of local partners such as the St. Martin Development Fund, the SMDF, we're exploring how to adapt and integrate aspects of that model here at home in St. Martin. Together, these initiatives reflect our broader policy agenda, building a justice system that is grounded in the rule of law, professional in its execution, and human in its design. A system that the people of St. Martin can trust and can take pride in. We're not only transforming our facilities, we're also transforming our approach. And the Advanced SXM initiative, as it's been coined, is a clear example of that commitment. With that being said, the prison construction is scheduled to begin in Q4 of this year. And that marks, for me, I guess, a major step in moving forward as we continue to strengthen our justice system. Additional information about the prison construction will be shared with the public as we move through that process. And again, just endeavoring to provide constant updates. And that was it in terms of prepared remarks, but I'm of course available to spend the time answering questions.
Thank you, Minister Tackling, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, August 6, 2025. We now move over to the question and answer session, and Bibi Hatshaw of SMN News, you have the floor.
Good morning, colleagues. Minister, good morning. Thank you for coming. Minister, I applaud the initiative of signing these agreements. But seeing things done, getting things done, for me, it speaks another story. Constantly, we're getting complaints from the prison. I mean, the situation in there is horrible, but yet prisoners are claiming that you're not listening to them. They are like expressing their feelings. And I'm not talking about just the ankle bracelet and getting free on ankle bracelet, because we know this is has been spoken about a lot. But the actual situation, the safety, the security, the shorter staff, all of this is plaguing them. The lack of training or even programs for them to develop themselves, come out of prison as a better person. We talk about it, we sign agreements, but nothing happened. UNOPS. For the longest while, I'm hearing about UNOPS, the prison construction. Now it's Q4 again. I mean, it's like we're signing agreements, but nothing is happening. What are you going to do differently to actually kick off these programs?
Yeah. So, the unfortunately, progress takes time. And a lot of times it's small steps that eventually make up to one thing. And I think that one way that I've approached looking at running this ministry is it feels like like a container ship is moving, and you can't turn a container ship right away. You have to adjust the path very, very slowly. And I think that's what we're doing here as well. And yes, UNOPS, a lot of times these processes take time, especially here in government, that I've learned as well, coming from the private sector. That's been an adjustment, of course, and having to follow bureaucracy and all the red tape and the rules. But UNOPS is actually on schedule with the timelines that were agreed upon then. And what we're trying to do now is communicate those more so that people don't think, oh, well, we heard about something once, but then we didn't get any more updates. And initially, we did have a couple months delay in the UNOPS in the construction, because the way that the tender was initially launched earlier this year was unsuccessful, which meant that they had to go back to the drawing board and tender in a different way. So right now, we're actually in the final phases of negotiating the contract with the contractor that scored the best out of that. And that process is ongoing. And I've been told by those involved in that process that within the next week, they hope to come to an agreement with that contractor. And on the back end, of course, we're ensuring that UNOPS can register its office here, that their staff have residency, that we're also dealing as a Council of Ministers with, okay, how do we facilitate the immediate construction? We're busy with RIDVROMI for the building permit. That's basically in the approval stage right now. Besides that, we're also looking at, once a company is selected, how do we help them mobilize as quickly as possible here, which is why we're thinking, okay, Q4, sometime October, November, we hope that they can actually start the construction up there. And then, of course, we have an entire PR campaign going with that, because it will be a nuisance to the community up there as well. And those are all elements that had to be considered in selecting a contractor as well. You can't just come there. You have people still in the space. You have to look, how do I minimize noise? How do I minimize nuisance for the area? So all of these things had to be taken into account, which is why it's taken a little bit longer than we would have liked. But actually, it is in accordance with the timelines, give or take, maybe now a 3-month delay because of the failed tender earlier this year. So that's the situation with UNOPS. And initially, the agreement with UNODC was not supposed to start for another year or two. And what I did, because I actually did listen to the cries and the complaints from the inmates, is I've continued to say I have an obligation as Minister of Justice to the individuals that are detained now. I cannot tell them, oh, just wait, we're going to have a new prison in 2 years. I can't tell them that. And that's the reason that now we went and digged and looked and had to get very creative with funding to be able to have UNODC start sooner, because I told them, this year, you need to give me something that I can do for the people. And besides that, which is why I've also brought in, and I went to Aruba. I went to see what they're doing over there. I spoke to this foundation, Tur Costa Posible, when I was there in Aruba, actually. I invited them to come here, to come and see the prison, to speak to SMDF, because SMDF has similar certifications that can allow them to do the same type of work, that we can leverage their network, so that we could look, hopefully within the coming months, can we bring trainees here? The way that the program works in Aruba, for example, they bring trainees from Europe that then come for 6 weeks, and they're volunteers. And also the prison staff, the prisoners get paid just like the volunteers do in those programs as well. So they come in, let's say for 6 weeks, they make jewelry, they paint a mural, and then you have constant programs. Because a lot of times the issues that we have here is we have a program in the prison that's dependent on a single individual, and that person leaves, and then the program is gone. And what we're trying to do is, how can we build a system also in Point Blanche that is not dependent on an individual, on a person, that and all of a sudden they can't have it anymore. And that's what we saw with woodworking that was happening at some point. Of course, then the workshop got destroyed, but then you also have no person to come in and do it. So these are all little things that we're looking at. How do we build a system that will last? And I know it's not from one day to the next, but I did get an update. At least the GD program was one that had been delayed after the fire. That was because the internet cable coming into that classroom was severely damaged, and we were having difficulty getting that repaired. And I was told that, a workaround was being sought, and at least from this week, they were hoping to be able to reinstate those GED programs. But then, unfortunately, we also have that not many of the inmates take part in that GED program. I think it's a very small group. But so this is, we're taking steps, and I know that we would like to see overnight change. But, unfortunately, it's, we have to take these steps. I would love tomorrow to hire more staff, but then I have issues if it goes to finance. They say, but you don't have formation. You don't have to. So there's so many different steps that we need to it's a big chessboard and a puzzle. So we're taking the steps, and I want to assure, even any of the inmates that are listening, that I do listen to them and that I do hear them, and I'm working very hard to fix these things for them. And one of the things, when I visited the prison just after the fire, they told me, Minister, we have nothing to do. Minister, we just sitting up here. And, and I said, it's unfortunate now I have to fix a place that now all my energy is going into a facility that you all burnt down to now fix it, that it's humane for you to be able to, it's healthy for you to be able to stay in here. While all of that energy was energy I was actually spending to find things for them to do, to find a way for them to reintegrate. And all of this is part of that program. And I know it's not a today to tomorrow thing, but I am very excited and very proud of the steps that we're taking. And I feel like we're building a foundation that can stand up and that we can use over time.
Minister, I think there was a woodworking program in place at the prison. Mm-hmm. Do you know how long ago that stopped, or if it stopped at all? And then what about the sewing program that was initiated by former Minister Anna Richardson?
Yeah, so I believe the woodworking, what had happened also was that the workshop was destroyed after Irma. And then, of course, there were discussions about fixing that. And another issue that, unfortunately, that we've run into in this period of reconstruction towards a new facility, a lot of the funding that we have from the Netherlands, there's the concept of you can't spend €1 more than once. So for them, it's we're not going to let you spend all this money to repair a place that then we're going to be fixing in a couple of years. So those were some of the choices that had to be made as well, where it was, I know one of those was the chapel. And because the price, I think, to repair the chapel was close to $1 million. And then they said, well, we're not going to give you that money now to repair a chapel while in a few years you're going to have a new facility. So, and the sewing, I was told that one of the issues was material, being able to source material constantly. And again, that is one of the issues where government doesn't pay very well. And that then you can't order the material, or the people won't release to you. And these are the issues that we're constantly faced with when it comes to vendors not wanting to work with the government, which, again, from my private sector background, very difficult for me to understand, but I've had to learn to understand it, or learn to accept it somehow to a certain extent sitting here.
Thank you, Minister. Emily from Island 92 Radio, you have the floor.
Thank you, Minister, for being the sole minister here today. Appreciate that. So first, a clarification question. The construction process for the new prison, you said it's supposed to start at the end of this year. What's the time frame for that construction? So
the prison will be built in 2 phases. So we're going to construct phase 1. During phase 1, we will go from the 80 spaces that we have now to 120. And then once phase 1 is complete, we will relocate the current prison population into that phase 1 of that facility. That is, if we start in Q4, we're hoping that by the beginning of 27, so that's sometime Q1 2027, that we'd be able to take that facility into use. And then the second phase a year later. So we're looking at an entire horizon of about 3 years into 2028.
Okay. So again, I think great work. I think it's nice that you're taking a structural approach, looking towards the future, so that I understand. This is a 3.8 million euro 4-year program. Mm-hmm. Is government contributing any matching funds? Mm-hmm. Is government making a plan that when this money expires to continue? Mm-hmm. And are there legislative changes that you're going to need to make to sort of dovetail with the efforts? Yeah. For example, our labor, we talk about how do you reintegrate these people back into our communities.
Yep.
But I know from the business sector, our labor laws are fairly rigid. And, if you looked at it, let's say more as an internship type program that you weren't so tied to somebody, you might be more willing to give them a chance. So is there perhaps a different type of employment agreement for people that are coming out? Are those types of things the softer parts of this whole program is got to rest on government's shoulders? So matching funds, long-term plan, and legislative changes to dovetail with this effort.
Yes, to all of those. So the first part of that 3.8 million, about 800 and something thousand has been contributed by the country of St. Martin, which I did this year. So we've paid actually for that portion from here. And then as of next year, the Dutch government will be contributing into that. So that makes up that 3.8 million. Basically, the cost of them starting earlier, we bore. And the way that we did that was over the years, and actually part of this 3.8 million was also over years, the Netherlands has been giving subsidies to us for us to use for the prison. And there was a lot of underuse of those funds, which meant that at some point that a reallocation took place. And last year when I came in, there was a subsidy that we still had that was expiring at the end of last year. And I came in and I asked, can I please get an extension on this? And it was about 850,000 euros that we still had that was not spent for a number of years. And of that, I had plans on what I wanted to do with that money during this year in terms of rehabilitation programs, mental health programs, and the like. And in that discussion with the Netherlands, it became, okay, well, let's have the UNODC commence sooner. And then you take that, will allow you to keep the subsidy and let that be your contribution towards the UNODC. So that's the way that we structured that. And as part of the money that was provided to us by the Netherlands for the prison construction, a component of that, about, I think, 10 million euros or something like that, was meant for soft components. So soft components were designed by UNOPS. We have 9 different soft components that have been worked on paper. Some of these are also prison industries, adequate staffing, reintegration, rehabilitation. And out of these 9 soft components, of course, now we need to start making choices in terms of how do we implement, because I would love to have all of it, but it becomes a question of the operational costs of the prison facility and what we as a country can actually carry. So in terms of, that's the role of UNODC now, to help us implement different parts of these soft components. And part of this is also in terms of that reintegration, rehabilitation. Some of the things we've been looking at is, for example, on the French side, I know that businesses, when you have inmates that you take in as staff, that the government pays a portion of that. I think we want to look at, how can we make it attractive, and looking at what legislation needs to change. One of the things that also needs to change is our prison legislation itself, the legislation that really regulates the functioning of the prison system is, as I say, it was from Jesus, when Jesus was a child. It's very, very old, antiquated legislation. And if we're coming up with a new facility, I think that the legislation needs to grow with that. So we're also working, I have a technical assistance request out with the Netherlands to look if they can provide some legislative support to us, because, we're short on legislative lawyers to be able to work on certain components that have to do with this. So those are different trajectories that we're working on through different avenues. So, I talk about one thing, but I have like 10 fishing poles out at the same time and trying to see, and eventually I have a vision for where we want to end up, and that all these little components will contribute over time to take us to the finish line. So I think that answers all of those questions.
Thank you, Minister. We now move on to the second round. Bibi, you have the floor.
Minister, last week I asked you about something that I didn't think you answer it. There was, I think you yourself mentioned it a few weeks ago about the lack of cooperation, backbiting within the staff of IND, which contributed to some of the backlog. Have you had a chance to address that issue to get your staff to start working as a team? And I know you've been saying a new system, and that there's a glitch, continuous glitch with the current system, and that is one of the reasons, according to you, for the backlog. Since then, I know it's a week, but what was done to start taking these applications, at least manually,
Yeah.
to avoid the unjustifiably denial that is taking place. Because after the press briefing last week, I received a number of calls about their papers being denied. Many of them have to go to court to file an appeal.
Yeah.
You know, so what exactly? Yeah, your new system is not ready. But what else is being done to at least alleviate the backlog and get your staff working together?
So a couple different things in terms of working together. We have a meeting scheduled. Unfortunately, one of the departments, their kind of section head is off island. So I've been waiting for that person to come back so that we can sit again to kind of talk in an integrated way of, okay, how can we all work together? Because nobody going anywhere anytime soon. So we need to find a way to all work together in the best interest of the service that we provide to the public. In terms of I did hear you also on the denials, and I can say in the last week I have not signed off on any denials because I've asked specifically, the way that we have a process now is I have a certain section that then sends me, that section head will say, okay, Minister, all of these denials are ready for your approval, for you to go and look at them. And I, sent the request back when I said, I want to know that you not only sent an email to these people, but that you called everybody and said, okay, let me give you an additional period and I was like, and if you can't prove to me that you did, then I'm not validating or signing off anything, and we have to look how we're going to figure it out. So that's at least one portion where I've said, stop trying to hide behind the system and at least pick up the phone then and make sure that you make a call to that person and say, look, an email was sent to you. Did you receive it? I'll give you another 2 weeks to come in and bring the papers, and then you can submit them manually. One of the issues that we have with those manual submissions is that a lot of times within immigration is divided into different sections, and you have intake, you have advice, you have compliance. And intake very often is one person or somebody's on sick leave. And so if everybody has to bring in manual files, then it becomes a problem with being able to have sufficient capacity to accept those. So I think that's why we don't want to too drastically change work processes now either while we're in the middle of trying to integrate into a new system. So at least those are some of the things that we're trying in a pragmatic way to look at how we deal with denials or things that will affect people. So I have to say I haven't been signing off on any denials for right now until I feel that I'm convinced that enough effort was made by the department to ensure that that individual had the opportunity to bring in that paperwork.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Bibi. Emil, you have the floor.
So Minister, although you come from private sector, you are in a political environment now. So I think being able to identify a baseline of where you are with your current prison system in terms of recidivism, the rate where inmates that are coming out, committing crimes, and going back in, which I understand anecdotally is very high. There's people who come out and then within a couple of weeks are already committing crimes and back in the justice system again. So what's your plan in terms of measuring your current level of rehabilitation, the success of what's not there now, so that you can benchmark that against in the future? And I think it's also good if you explain to the community that if your program's successful, we have safer streets, you have more space in prison. So if you could help connect the dots for the people, why this is so important beyond just being more humane.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one I actually had. We have a tripartite meeting that takes place we have one every 2 or 3 months between the chief public prosecutor and the attorney general in Curaçao, the prosecutor general, the chief of police, and the minister of justice. It's called the driehoek in Dutch. And we actually had this discussion on, when did we have one? On Monday. And that was one of my questions where I asked, because of course I have as I indicated, I've asked the police to put together a comprehensive data set for me, looking at where are we seeing crime trends, but also how is our response? Are there more arrests than there were typically? But then if we are seeing more arrests, does it mean that there's more crime or that we're more effective in our pursuit of crime? So we're trying to put together all of those numbers, and I've been told it's going to take a little bit of time because, again, we don't have a ton of staff. But they're busy trying to populate all those numbers and then also get an idea. I've asked, but I want to see also those repeat offenders, not just, okay, the police are arresting somebody, But is it a person that you also arrested 2 weeks ago that we had to then release because we don't have space? And so that we're trying to see where we're seeing the trends in terms of behavior and what we can do about that. And I've continued to say, as a Ministry of Justice, we're trying very hard, to really work at being able to make everybody feel safe, but at the same time, we can't ignore that there's a social problem otherwise. And that, I think, is the difficult part. And we're really trying to look for programs where we can invest in the youth. And I've had private sector individuals reach out to me and say, Minister, does the Justice Ministry have programs where I can work with at-risk youth, or where I can, if I can finance or help? And so I'm trying. It shouldn't be my job necessarily, but we're trying as much as we can to see what can we do. And I know my chief of staff went out yesterday to speak to an organization that's doing work for kind of unemployed youth and things like that, to see if we can invest into their program to create more opportunities for some of these individuals, when it comes to maybe the marine industry and things like that. So we're really trying to, I would love the prison to be empty, because I would much rather invest in every program on the road than, because it's very expensive to operate that prison. So I would much prefer using the Ministry of Justice's money to do other things than to lock people up. And I hope that over time we get to a place where we can say that half of the prison is empty. But I think that's a societal change that we all need to go through together. So hopefully slowly. And I think that we're trying to make that step right now, and also showing that there are consequences for your actions in this country, and that you can't just get away with breaking the law. And we're trying to do that very seriously in the traffic controls and the scooter controls and the things like that we're seeing. And as I said, I think last week, where we have to be done with this land of lawlessness.
And if you could connect the dots for the public, this isn't just...
Oh, yeah.
If you could connect the dots for the public, because this isn't just, humanitarian treatment of the inmates is important, but how this impacts society in terms of safety.
Yeah, and I think we want to have better formed individuals come back into society and find their place, right? And then the more we invest into that reintegration and resocialization, the safer our streets become after that, or you have more contributing persons in your society that hopefully would not go back to that life of crime. So, and that's actually, one of the things that I found very powerful in that program I just mentioned from Aruba. One of the stories that they told me, the group that they work with is that 18 to 31 group. And they've given me the example where they've gotten funding for some of these young men that come out of prison, and actually the day you come out, they're at the sidewalk with a suitcase for you, and they take them abroad, with the permission, of course, of the of reclassering, of probation services. And they told me a story of one young man that went to Italy and worked on a boat and went sailing and spent a year there, and now came back and is working with other youth from his neighborhood, trying to expose them to different things. And I think that's the important part very often, right? And that's, I think, the issue that is difficult for the Justice Ministry to fix, because we're the end of the line, where the train stops. And it's difficult when if you put a person back in an environment that was toxic, they'll get sick again. And we're not fumigating that environment. And that's, I think, the difficulty, where I said it becomes a social issue, it becomes an educational issue that we can't continue to ignore as a country. So I hope that my colleagues, that as a community, that we start to see the importance in that.
Thank you, Minister. We now move on to the third and final round. Bibi, you have the floor.
Minister, I have two questions for you. Mm-hmm. One is an opinion I'm asking you for, and the other one is about a case. Since earlier this year, we're hearing about this sexual harassment that's taking place within government. Mm-hmm. As a minister that sits in the Council of Ministers, this case, I don't know, I'm hearing more than one, but I know at least one of them was discussed several times with the Council of Ministers, including the last report. What's your feeling? How do you feel about how this case is being handled? Mm-hmm. Give me your opinion as a woman, as a lawyer, as a Minister of Justice. Do you believe victims are getting justice? Mm-hmm. And now my other question is about July 22nd last year.
Okay.
There was a shooting a woman was killed. And since then, someone was arrested, but that person is in Guadeloupe. And I know you would know it's a political leader and his companion. The companion died. But since then, nothing from the prosecutor's office. As Minister of Justice, have you gotten any update as to how this case is going?
Yeah. The first part, I think, difficult, obviously things that we discuss in the Council of Ministers are meant to be confidential, so I can't share those with the public because those are confidential meetings, and I don't necessarily want to talk about an individual or a specific case, but obviously as a woman, I think sometimes, obviously I feel very strongly about sexual harassment, especially, and we had similar stories within the Ministry of Justice as well, and I think it's taken time, I think, for the Me Too movement to catch up to St. Martin, and as discussions that I've had with some individuals who have, come forward and shared their stories, that I have a lot of respect for their bravery to come forward and to put themselves out there and to be willing to start to make that change, because I think it starts with one person, and then we've seen how that has kind of grown. And I think over time, we'll get to a place where, as a community, I think as a Caribbean community still, we have these ways that we think it's okay to say things or do things because it's cultural. But then as you get older and we see the way that the world is evolving, you're like, oh, actually, that's not okay. And I think that we all have that story as a woman navigating the world at any time in your life that has had to deal with some form of sexual harassment or sexual abuse. So I don't think that has any space, even in our government. I think that we need to take those things seriously and that we need to act and show what is right behavior and wrong behavior. And I think especially as a government, because again, I think we need to be the example to our youth and to our children. And I say that as a minister. I've said it on the floor of Parliament as well, where I say we need to look at how we show up in this world and how we treat each other, because that's the example that we're setting for these kids. So I think that's one part. One of the things as a Ministry of Justice that we're doing in that aspect is I was actually, when I was in Strasbourg, I had meetings as well about the Treaty of Istanbul. The Treaty of Istanbul is about violence against women and girls. And, one of those is actually also that, sexual harassment and that being described and also taken up in local legislation. As a ministry, we've been very supportive of that initiative. I actually spoke as well at the No Mas No More conference back in June. And so we're very deeply supportive of that. And I'm not wearing the jacket today, but I've been wearing a pin on my lapel that talks about violence against women. So part of that is it. So I think that shows my stance and my opinion without going into the specific case in this point. But yeah. And then as it comes to your second question, I believe it was July 17th and not the 22nd, but you can double check it. So it was the next day we had an election meeting, so I remember it very vividly that night. So generally speaking, the minister is not involved in individual cases and I don't receive updates about, specific cases that are going on. However, of course, I have inquired here and there, and I think similar to what was mentioned in the newspaper this week that I read, I think yesterday in the newspaper, that it is a very complex case. And I know that there is information sharing going on between the Dutch prosecutor or the St. Martin prosecutor's office and the French prosecutors. And but that's as much as I've been told in terms of, that there's an investigation ongoing. I don't know any of the details of that investigation. So hopefully, I too hope that we can find out, that somebody can be brought to justice and that we can find out the why. I don't know that we will ever know the why, but if we know the who, then I think at least maybe there will be some form of justice for that family. So I know that it's ongoing, and I really hope that it can come to a resolution.
Thank you, Minister. Emil, you have the final question.
So I took note of the various videos of the actions, the traffic enforcement by the police, and I would like to commend you. I think that that's been applauded in the community. I see the posts, very, very positive, and I'd like to encourage you that, to continue and with perhaps even more vigor than in the past. But we spoke in the past about something that I've also been hearing about, which was hit and run accidents. So you have indeed scooters without plates, but you also have vehicles with missing number plates or obscured number plates. And then there was 2 incidents, and actually just before the press conference today, I was understanding that the accident on Coal Bay Hill was actually a scooter running into a car. The car is questioned if they only have third-party insurance, and if the scooter is not insured, and if the driver took off, the scooter driver took off, that person in the vehicle is left in a financial hole. Same thing, you saw the truck that ran into the Winair building and then took off. So number one, how is the police department treating hit and runs? Because I understood that that's a criminal offense versus a traffic incident. And you spoke in the past about speaking to the insurance companies. I don't know if this was something that was legislated, that they had to create a fund for hit and run type accident claims. So there's 2 questions in there.
Regarding the fund, indeed, that piece of legislation falls under the Minister of Finance. And I know that she was intending to have a meeting with all the insurance brokers and companies and everything. I'm not sure if that meeting already took place, but I know she mentioned to me just after the cleanup on the bridge that she was going to have a meeting with all the insurance companies. So I know that is pending, so I can refer to her maybe for an update on that and ask her cabinet where they are with that point. And indeed, when it comes to hit and runs, it is a criminal offense. And so, I can't give the specifics of how the police is dealing with that, but indeed, the incident last night as well, the individual hit this lady and her children in the car, and the car and the scooter caught on fire, and then jumped on another scooter and drove off, which is mind-boggling to me. And I happen to be that someone knows this family that then is in my cabinet. So it's we know of the driver of the vehicle. So that's how I kind of heard the way it happened, because I got called last night about it. So it's to me, it's a person in a vehicle with their families. It's very unsafe and reckless behavior, and it's behavior that we will take very seriously as a Ministry of Justice, and are trying to see, if we can find and apprehend this individual, because this type of behavior can't be allowed. And indeed, the car in question is totaled also. So it's a very serious situation. And I'm sure that the police will investigate it with all the seriousness that it deserves, especially, in light of the types of things that we're really going after when it comes to traffic safety and just general safety on the island, and the stop and searches that we're doing. And we're really trying to make the streets safer. And I think that was the answer to that. I don't have specific updates again on these individual cases, but I can look into it. And I know that very often we are going and looking for the individuals who did this. And I mean, I think similar, I saw that update also in the newspaper and had heard from the police. But a couple of days before the truck drove into Winair, the night before, a car was lit on fire in the airport employee parking lot. And we're really being able to utilize our camera surveillance quite well. And, in the coming year, we're also hoping to expand that camera project and to be able, because we're really seeing that it's making a very big difference. Even when we see what's happening if we look at the robbery in Simpson Bay Resorts or Front Street, we're able quite quickly to be able to assemble information and find these people because of, strategic locations for cameras, and of course, help from the business community as well, and individuals always willing to share their camera footage of what happened. So we'll continue to go after those things in that line. And of course, if an individual is caught, we will go after them to the full extent of the law.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, members of the media. This does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Any further questions can be sent to the Minister's Cabinet in writing. Honorable Minister of Justice, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, August 6, 2025. For rebroadcast, tune into stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.